Welcome back to yet another Darktide build guide video. Welcome to the new year as well. We are going to be taking a look at the Mark 4E Crusher today, so without further ado, we will go ahead and hop into it. I'm also going to have a card right above right now that's going to take you to a really good Zealot gameplay with the Crusher where I go through and I explain how I'm using the Crusher, how I'm using the attacks, and you can see just what I'm doing with the Crusher all around for a full high intensity level 5 mission. I don't remember what mission it was, but I take this exact build in and you can see exactly what I do with it. I really recommend it. I think I did a pretty good job at explaining it. And if you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I did just get engaged over the New Year's, so a little celebratory subscription to me wouldn't hurt. Just saying. Anyways, without now I'm done shilling, we will go ahead and get into the Crusher build. Now this is the exact same build from my short format Crusher build guide, but I'm going to go a lot more in depth and detail on what exactly I'm doing on this build. It's probably going to be more like a 25-minute video instead of 5 minutes, so 5 times more content for you guys. You're welcome. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So, the Indignus Mark IV Indignatus Mark 4E Crusher is our weapon of choice here. Go ahead and take a look. The most important 3 modifiers that I would say are damage, penetration, and power output. This power output's really helpful for keeping hordes at bay whenever you use your special area blast attack with the Crusher. I think, in my opinion, it helps keep things back. It's been toned down since the weapon came out, I think. It's not as good at keeping everybody back, but it's still super good. Definitely good for going at Crushers or Bulwarks, breaking their stance and staggering them, which is important for the Skull Crusher that we'll get to in a minute. And then for our perks, we have a really interesting setup here. Instead of taking Unyielding or Carapace armored damage like you would do on most builds, we actually have unarmored enemies and flak armored enemies. And what that does for us is a lot of enemies in the game fall under one of these 2 categories. And what the Crusher really excels at is just dominating hordes, just 1v1ing or 1v 100ing entire hordes of enemies. And what you're doing is you're keeping all the ads off of your special killer teammates, such as your veterans and your psychers. So this really allows you to give your teammates some breathing room for them to be able to do their job. A lot of the times what happens in Darktide is you'll notice one of your teammates or 2 of your teammates aren't doing a lot of damage, or they're not killing enough things. And what happens is when your veterans and your psychers get overran, they have to go into melee or something like that that's stopping them from doing their main role, which is taking care of specials. So when a Zealot is taking care of the ads and the veterans and the psychers are taking care of the specials, you'll notice that the game is kind of a walk in the park when everybody's doing their roles. But when teammates are getting overran, you have a problem. So that's what the Crusher really excels at, is just dominating hordes of ads. Anybody that's smaller than a Bulwark will pretty much get pushed around by the Crusher. So anyways, to the perks, we have plus 20% damage to unarmored enemies. A lot of the ads and some of the gunners as well are classified as unarmored on part of their bodies. So going for body shots on some enemies makes more sense. And overall, this helps you clear out large hordes of enemies that are ads and lower health enemies, but this lets you just one-shot a lot of guys. And then we have plus 25% damage to flak armored enemies. This lets you take on the other large amount of enemies that are in the game. Some of the more armored gunners are classified as flak armored, and this lets you do more damage to them as well. So we're really taking care of everything that's below Crusher and Mutant size is what the Crusher really excels at. The Crusher excels at not killing the Crusher, ironically. But anyways, we'll get into the blessings now. Skull Crusher is the most important blessing on this build, and my favorite personally. I wonder if there's a Skull Crusher for it. I don't really know. But anyways, target receives 3 stacks of plus 10% damage if already staggered. So when you use your charged attack on the Crusher, you'll get a stagger, or if you just hit somebody a few times, which brings us to our next blessing, Hammer Blow, plus 25% impact. It stacks impact for 1.5 seconds, stacks 5 times. So you can get plus 125% impact, and when you stack this up, especially since we're going to be running Martyrdom, as everybody has liked to remind me to say. However, since everybody has reminded me how to say Martyrdom correctly, I will be now calling it Marty Dome, because Marty gives that dome, so you're welcome. We'll go over that more in the talent tree here in just a minute. Anyways, Hammer Blow is our impact stacking, and then once we get that impact stagger from stacking up our hammer blow stacks, we get plus 30% stagger on any enemies. So you'll find that when crushers and maulers run at you, stuff like that, if you charge up a good horizontal heavy attack and give them a big whack, you'll find a lot of the time you can stagger. And if you're not getting a stagger, you can always use the special attack for the crusher as well, and you get a guaranteed stagger. And then you can go for the overhead heavy, so you'll do a horizontal heavy, get the stagger into an overhead heavy, and that overhead heavy from the crusher actually does a ton of damage. I can actually show you guys that here. So if we go to inspect attack breakdown, so we go for our heavy attacks. So we have strike down, and then our whole horizontal wide range attack. What you want to do is get this horizontal wide range attack first, and you're going to stagger like whatever mauler or whatever's running at you, and then they're going to get that stagger, and you're going to go for this overhead strike down. So you can go for say, or you could just use a special quick attack special with the charged attack. You'll get a stagger from that as well, and then you'll go into this overhead strike down heavy, and that overhead strike down heavy is going to give you a ton of damage. As you can see, the strike down does, let's do unyielding just for giggles. So we do 1,000 weak spot damage. This is an overhead attack, so it's pretty easy to get headshots as well. So we get 1,000 weak spot damage, and our sweeping only does 500 weak spot damage, so for a weak spot hit. So if you clearly want to go for this strike down attack, is really where you're getting your damage from. And if you got the 30% damage bonus to that on top of 1,000, so you're getting 1,300 damage on a weak spot hit, that's a lot of damage. You can really mess up some guys with that. Now we've gotten through the crusher, will take us to the bolt gun. This is the exact same bolt gun from before. I have decided since making that previous video that I like Cavalcade more, I think, than Pinning Fire. Pinning Fire's been nerfed a little bit since the release of the game. However, both are still really viable, and I'd recommend both. But Cavalcade personally is my favorite. And we come to the modifiers for the bolt gun. Really, damage is the most important. Reload speed is a very nice amenity to have. Whatever, I couldn't think of the word. Anyways, really nice amenity to have for reload speed. Collateral might be really good. There are some hidden blessings in the game that haven't been released yet that makes the bolter into like a slug machine gun, and that will be really good to have if that blessing ever comes out. Unknown if it ever will. Please, Fat Shark, you could do us some solids. Release some new blessings? Question mark. Anyways, mobility, dump stat, because the bolt gun is already horrible at mobility. And then we come to the perks. The bolt gun is specifically here to deal with the things that the crusher is not dealing with particularly well. The crusher is still really good at taking on unyielding enemies such as bulwarks and gunners, or what's the big gunner? Anyways, the Ogren gunner guy. They're really good at taking care of both of those. Crusher's not so much, and monstrosity's not so much. So we need unyielding damage. Plus 25% is ideal. Plus 20 will do. Plus 15, definitely not. You need to pump that up. And then we take plus 25% damage to carapace armored enemies, and this is going to really help us with the crushers. And I don't remember what the other guy is, but he's got like the big heavy chain axe. He does a lot of damage as well. This will help you take care of those two. Those are the two normal enemies in the game that the crusher really struggles with. Everybody else the crusher can deal with, but when it comes to crushers, and that's confusing. The crusher deals with the crusher. Anyways, 25% damage carapace. Take it. I highly recommend. You have to have it. These are the two you need. And then we have Cavalcade. Plus crit chance really helps you stack up the crit chance. The crit chance really helps you take out more crushers, and especially when you're going for headshots, you'll feel this crit chance stack up when you hit a few more crits. Very helpful. This is the difference between taking out 2 crushers with 1 magazine, or 3 or maybe even 4 crushers with 1 magazine. It's a big difference. And then we have Shattering Impact. This gives you brittleness to crushers. You really need this one. You can take Pinning Fire or Cavalcade. Definitely need Shattering Impact, which is going to give brittleness to those armored targets, which is going to make you do more damage to the armored targets, which is what we already struggle with. So voila. Those are the weapons, and now we will be hopping over into the Curios. For Curios, we have plus 1 wound, and plus 20% max health, or whatever, the highest max health you can get on here. So, going back to the wounds, I run up to 3 wounds. Sometimes you can run 2 wounds, or you could even run only 1 wound and then a health and a toughness curio. It's really up to you. I like to run 2 wounds and then a health curio, but I did run it with a health and a toughness curio. I noticed I was a lot more tanky, which is good considering we I personally am running this build a little more on the edge. I don't have that one talent that lets me survive death for a few seconds and regain some health. But anyways, we have +1 wound. And on all the Curios, we're going to be taking damage resistance to gunners because everything else, all the other damage resistances are kind of crap. And then we're going to be taking, the ideal one would be damage resistance to gunners, plus 5% toughness, plus 5% max health. That way we're still getting plus toughness and plus health, and we're getting plus wounds, so we also get that damage buff from Marty Dome. And here I have plus toughness regeneration speed on this one. I mean, your Curios don't need to be perfect. Don't sweat too much about your Curios, guys. What I'd really just recommend is plus wound, plus max health, plus gunners, and the third slot honestly can be whatever you want it to be. See, I have order dockets on here. It's not, Curios are not going to keep you from winning the game. They will make the game a little bit easier, but to be honest, it's really, they're really not that big of a deal. So without further ado, getting into the talent tree, we will start off as we always do with the Thickums tree for the Zealot. We are going to take plus 20% damage to backstab melee hits because we have to, and why not take more damage if we can get a backstab hit anyways. We aren't rolling a lot of crits on this build. We do get a decent amount of crits on this build, specifically because we're using the Zealot's F ability that gives us a guaranteed crit, but we're not going to take Scourge because bleed's not important for us, and we really don't need, we're not hitting that many crits. And then we have toughness regeneration replenishment on melee kill. This is important because what are we doing with this build? We are flying into enemy hordes of tons of ads, and we are just smacking dudes around. We're killing dudes, and it's really good. And specifically, we're using what I like to do, and if you'll watch that gameplay that I've linked below in the description and pinned at the beginning of the video, is they're doing a heavy and a light combo that's a horizontal combo that'll be a from the left heavy attack and then from the right light attack, and they're horizontal swings, so you're getting a large swath in front of you. Enemies, you're just knocking around, stacking tons of impact and momentum, and you're just knocking dudes around. It's great. And you get a ton of toughness from this. You essentially become invincible from doing this. You regenerate so much toughness that you can fly into huge hordes, and in the event you do get hit once or twice, you'll use your Zealot's F ability if you have it, which you hopefully do. You should, if you're playing conservatively and correctly, and you'll instantly be acted to full health. So what this essentially does, it makes us into a absolute tank. And we have plus 15% toughness, and then on top of what I was just talking about, using that F ability in the time of need when you're out, when you get hit, is you're going to take 50% toughness damage reduction for 4 seconds after using that F as well. So this skill tree right here makes your Zealot into a hell of a tank, and he can really just sit in the middle of a horde and do whatever he wants. And that takes me to my next step. When you're playing Zealot, guys, if you're in doubt, dodge. Zealot dodges better than any other character in the game. He has more dodges than everybody else in the game. He can dodge forever. He's a crazy dodger. His movement when he dodges is insane. He regens the dodges faster, it feels like. I don't know how the dodges exactly work. I don't even know if he actually has more dodges. I just know dodging on the Zealot works way better than it does on all the other characters, and that's probably because of his mobility on his dodge. And then we have, so we'll come over here now, we have Disdain, 5% damage on your next melee hit for each enemy hit. You're running these large, sweeping, heavy attacks and light attacks. So when you're doing this, you're stacking up to plus 25% extra damage on your next melee hit. Really helpful, especially if you're fighting a large horde, swinging around, and then you see, say, like a bulwark or a mauler or something coming at you. You can turn and give him a quick, wacky doodle to the head with an overhead heavy, and you're going to be doing a crazy amount of damage. So like the unyielding we looked at earlier is 1,000 damage for a weak spot heavy attack, and then this is plus 25%, so that's 1,250. And let's say you have staggered him for some reason or something. I mean, you could be doing 1,600. You can see how this damage just stacks, and this is without any of our Marty Dome stacks. So, anyways, moving on to our main path now, we have Anoint in Blood. So plus 25% range damage, reduce the further you are away from the target. This is good if you're whipping out the bolter right in front of some crushers. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend staying back a little bit, but plus 25% damage, plus our 25% carapace damage, we're doing plus 50% damage to carapace armored enemies. If you're really close, you're going to chew through them. You're going to absolutely blast them. And also, this is really good for monstrosities as well. So you get right behind a monstrosity, or you got the guy running at you, Plague Ogre's right in front of your face. You whip out the bolter, hip fire, hose into his face. you're doing plus, on my build, it would be plus 45% base damage with the bolter. Fantastic gains there. Can't argue with those. Then we have plus 20% increased damage against unyielding and infested enemies. This is why we don't take infested damage on their weapon. I also don't think infested damage on the weapon as a perk modifier is beneficial enough. I don't think the enemy type array is large enough for it to be useful. And in addition to that, you already destroy poxhounds like nobody's business really easily, so there's no point in taking unyielding damage or infested damage on your weapon. However, on the perk tree, that's where you should take it, because we get it here, and that's where it's really useful. It's really easy to pick up right here at the beginning of the tree, and we have to go through this way anyways. And I don't think this perk is particularly great. I mean, 20 plus 25% coherency, toughness regen, great. Take it if you want it, but this is, if you have a skill point, not a bad one to grab. This is so useful, especially because infested hordes are a very typical type of hordes, so you want to be able to shoot through those hordes. Let's see. What's next? We have toughness boost, more toughness, fantastic. This is why we don't run toughness Curios, because within the Zealot skill tree, there's 2 or 3 places you can pick up more toughness. So we take toughness damage reduction all over the place, and then we have toughness to pick up in the skill tree, so I don't really worry about toughness Curios. And then on to our next point, we have on taking damage, heal 25% of that damage. This is helpful. I like this one actually a lot. This saves you from some Mauler and Crusher hits sometimes. If you have a lot of toughness already, this will definitely help you sustain a little bit longer, especially since we're playing Martyrdom, where this feels so strange to say. Anyways, we store up the Martyrdom stacks or whatever. I don't remember where I was going with that. Anyways, you can take Voice of Terror if you like as well. Actually, no, I would not recommend that for this build, because you're not really whipping out and using the bolter that much. Never mind, scratch that. We have Immolation Grenade. This is the best grenade in my opinion. However, the Sunstorm Grenade is really useful, and there are definitely ways you can come through this left path and do this tree instead of this tree. So you could X these 3 points, and you still have to take Purge the Unclean. Absolutely vital to any Zealot build, basically. But you could definitely grab these 2 and then come through this tree here, and the Sunstorm Grenade is really good at blasting open bulwark shields, which is very helpful in being able to get weak spot hits on the bulwarks without having to use your charge up attack for the Crusher. So anyways, this is easy for staggering some enemies that are kind of annoying to deal with, that are big boys. If you come through this path, I would really recommend, what did these do? This one, damage that you would take health to the next one is reduced by 40%, or replenish 7.5% toughness on heavy attack kill. You use heavy attacks a lot in this build. Personally, I would probably take Vicious Offering, but I don't think you could go wrong with either of these. You get more toughness here, that's great, and this just gives you toughness regen while within range. So this tree is also super viable. You could really go either way. I'd grab these 2 for sure, and then just come and I would go this path right here, but you could go this path and take this left one, bleed for the Emperor as well. Either of those will work. We don't come down through the middle here. I don't think anything here is particularly great. This one is good if you have the skill points to grab it, but in my opinion, you're not really whipping out your ranged weapon and emptying it that often. I mean, you do it sometimes. You get 10% attack speed. That's nice, but I just don't find that this ability is up often enough. I have tried running it. I don't find that ability is up often enough for it to actually be that useful. We have toughness damage reduction over here is nice, and then these other ones here in the middle, I don't think this is a very good perk. So if you could get these 2, you could run them together, but this one's just not up enough for me to consider using this path. 30% impact strength is also great, so there is a feasible way to go through this path here, and it wouldn't be ridiculous or unreasonable build, but for me personally, I'm definitely taking this path over here, and I'll get into that in just a second why. And then over here way on the right, this Thy Wrath Be Swift is actually a very important perk that you can take as well on a build, and it doesn't sound like it is, but what it actually does is it works on melee attacks, but it also works on gunner attacks. So what happens a lot with the Zealot is you'll get caught out in the open by some scab gunners and whatever, and they will stun lock you to death, and it's a very annoying mechanic in the game. You can't dodge, you can't do anything, you're just kind of stuck there getting booty blasted, and it's really annoying. So you can take this perk, and that will let you be able to dodge out of it and such, which is nice. But I don't want to spend the 3 points to get all the way over here, and specifically this Dance of Death is like a total waste, and 5% toughness damage reduction is not that much, so spending 2 more points to get over here doesn't really help either, because we really need to get all the way down to the bottom of our skill tree where we get our goodies at. Moving on, we have the plus 15%, plus 15 toughness, plus 5% melee damage, fantastic. In this Crusher build, we're just building up melee damage. We want tons and tons of melee damage. We can take all the melee damage multipliers we have, because the base attack damage on the Crusher is actually not that great. And that's why before this big skill tree came out, the Crusher was one of those Zealot's worst weapons, because he just could not put out the damage that he needed to do to be competitive. But now that we have this huge skill tree, you can really stack up the damage bonuses. So we have the 5% melee damage. Movement speed is great. We have to take it. You can take Until Death, or you can take this left path. If you find you die a lot on this build, take this Until Death path. You can definitely use that if you're maybe not a skilled player. If you're not great at dodging yet, you can definitely take this right path. Work on dodging. When in doubt on the Zealot, dodge. When you're playing Zealot, just dodge and get better at dodging. If you're great at dodging on the Zealot, you will have no problem going all the way through level 5 high difficulty missions with basically any build. Just get better at dodging on the Zealot. But for me, I take this Duelist because on a successful dodge, is the activation on Duelist is strange and it doesn't work super great, and it has to do with how the game actually characterizes a dodge. And all because you dodged and dodged an attack doesn't mean you successfully dodged. The game has to essentially proc that sound where you're about to get hit, then you dodge, and that will activate Duelist. So it's inconsistent on activation, but it's very good, especially if you're against crushers or bulwarks. This actually gives you a lot of help because you're getting plus 50% weak spot and plus 50% crit hit damage. So stacking both of those together with a guaranteed F. So let's say you dodge and then you use your overhead heavy attack on a guaranteed F. You're going to absolutely do a crap ton of damage to whoever you're bonking in the noggin with the bonk stick. Then we have the Desperation, 20% melee damage for 5 seconds when stamina is depleted. We don't run any plus stamina on this build specifically so we can have this activated. And it's pretty easy to run out of stamina with this build because the Crusher is a pretty heavy weapon. It's not as easy to run out of stamina as, say, the Thunderhammer is, but it's pretty easy to run out of stamina on this build and just keep that up, sprinting around. Out of stamina, you get 5 seconds at plus 20% damage. Fantastic. I love that perk. I love that perk. It's fun to activate. I'm like, ooh, am I out of stamina? I don't know. I like doing it. It's kind of a strange way to play. Like sometimes you'll run around in a circle for a second to try and run out your stamina before jumping in on a monstrosity or something big. But yeah, anyways. 15% toughness damage reduction for your allies and coherency. That's a great perk. Can't argue with that. That's just good. It's just good. We have more toughness here, more toughness damage reduction here, and +1 stamina. So we really don't have any reason to go this direction. We already have plenty of toughness and toughness damage reduction, in my opinion. So we don't need to spend any points on these guys, especially because there's much better stuff down at the bottom for toughness damage reduction. And then we have Fury of the Faithful. We dash forward. You get 50% toughness regen, 20% attack speed, and your next melee hit gains oh my god. Your next melee hit gains 25% and is guaranteed crit. I believe that means 25% damage. Doesn't really say what that 25% is, but you get more damage and you absolutely donk somebody on the head, and we take 2 of those because 2 is better than 1. So, when you're using Chastise the Wicked, there's a lot of different ways to use it. First of all, I like to use it to jump in on a big horde of enemies, and with that guaranteed crit, you're going to fly in with a charged attack with your special like charge area blast attack, get an overhead heavy on somebody. That'll proc your 50% damage reduction for 4 seconds, so you're flying in there, hitting a guy, you're dodging around, taking a little bit less damage for a while, and that'll give you time to fly into a large horde, get a high value target, kill him, and then back out back to your team or something to a safe distance so you're not getting destroyed by crushers or maulers or whatever's in that huge stack. You're taking a lot less damage during that time. Then we have there's another way to play this as well. When you're in a horde, even of adds, if you get hit once or twice and your toughness is down, just pop this in the middle of the horde and you'll find that you're back up to max toughness, you're dodging and blocking, you should be just fine. You're killing a lot of guys. This is really good for using a pinch as well, so if you need some more toughness in a pinch or something, you just pop that and you're good to go. Plus 25% suppression. This actually helps a lot when running the, what's it called? Pinning Fire for the Bolter is good for upping the amount of power bonuses you get from pinning fire, I think. Not entirely sure how that works, but I think that helps. Then we have punishment. This is really important. This is actually one of the most important, absolutely have to take for the Crusher builds, is melee attack that hits at least 3 enemies, grants 30% impact for 5 seconds. This stacks 5 times, and at max stacks, it becomes uninterruptible. So when you're doing this combo that I talked about earlier, the from left horizontal heavy into from right light heavy to left heavy to right heavy, or light, so it goes heavy light heavy light heavy light, and you can just chain that forever. I mess it up all the time. You'll have to get your way back into the chain, but when you're doing that in a horde, it only takes 3 or 4 swings, probably 2 or 3 honestly if the horde is really large, to stack up a really large bonus where you are just uninterruptible, swinging your Crusher through huge hordes of enemies, absolutely blasting guys. So it's this is the most fun part about the Crusher, is flying into hordes, getting plus 50% damage toughness replenishment from melee hits, and then you're also just doing tons of damage from so you're getting this. So all these play together. Your disdain, your toughness replenishment on melee kill, additional toughness replenishment on melee kill, and your impact all play together to have your Crusher be this DPS blasting, area sweeping, uninterruptible horde cannon that absolutely clears screens and just lets you 1v100 hordes. It's so much fun. It's one of the best ways to play Zealot, because you can just fling yourself into hordes and then come out unscathed after killing like 100 guys. It's a great time. It's a great thing to do. I don't particularly recommend any of these perks. This one's really good for if, say, you're getting hit a lot. This helps you play better if you need some help. Just like if you can take this Until Death Path, you can take this Master's Retribution, but you have to spend the points to get there again, and there's things that I prefer to spend my points on, which brings us to the Toughness Damage Reduction. Woohoo! More Toughness Damage Reduction. There's plenty of that already. We have plus 5% melee damage. Absolutely fantastic. Can't argue with that. And we have plus 4% melee damage for 5 seconds on hit. Stacks 5 times, so that's plus 20% damage. So Sustained Assault, pairing with Disdain, pairing with Blood Redemption, pairing with Punishment. These are like the 4 keystones of the Crusher build that just make you crazy. And then we have the final main perk line. We have plus 10% melee attack speed. I love melee attack speed bonuses because with this Fury of the Faithful, we get plus 20% melee attack speed for 10 seconds on using our F. And then we also get plus 10% melee attack speed, so that's plus 30% melee attack speed, which is a plus 30% bonus to DPS, essentially. So you're doing plus 30%, you can almost think of it as a plus 30% damage increase, because you're hitting people 30% more often, 30% faster. So fantastic, fantastic. Absolutely have to take that. And then you get plus 10% health. Great, a little more tanky. You can take this perk here on the right if you don't want to take plus 2 wounds if you're a madman. I don't find this is that useful, and I don't think it does that much, and I find that when you're swinging in huge hordes, you're probably reducing your... Actually, we don't have anything that's reducing our cool... We don't take Invocation of Death, but you have your F plenty on this build. I don't think you need to be taking this. Plus 2 wounds is what's really going to be useful, because when we come back to the final Martyrdome, as you can see, that is how it's spelled. Martyrdome. M-A-R-T-Y-D-O-M-E. Clearly, that is how it's spelled. Anyways, you get plus 8% melee damage for each missing wound, up to a maximum of 7 missing wounds. So I'm always playing, and when you're playing on this build, I really notice the difference. At a round 3 missing wounds, you'll start to really notice that you're one-shotting adds, you're doing a lot more damage, and you're also going to be attacking faster, because per missing wound, you get 4% attack speed bonus. So we have... Just as a baseline, let's go over the baseline. Let's say we're missing 3 wounds. We're in a good spot. We're missing 3 wounds. We have plus 10% attack speed here, plus 12% attack speed here with 3 missing wounds. Honestly, you'll get used to playing with 4 or 5 missing wounds. So let's say you have 5 missing wounds because you're a madman. You're running max wounds. You're missing 5 wounds. So you're running 7 wounds. You're missing 5. You've got plus 20% attack speed here, plus 10% attack speed here. So that's plus 30% base attack speed just running around permanently while you're at that health state. And then if you use your F flying into a horde, you're going to have plus 50% attack speed for 10 seconds. So what that does is it allows you to stack impact with your punishment extremely quickly. And this is because we're running punishment, that's why I don't come up here and run this Emperor's Bullet or Hammer of the Faith. I mean, that'd be super useful, and maybe there's even a way where you can have an even more ridiculous area control build, but I find just this punishment is more than enough paired with the Crusher's innate stagger ability, impact ability, that this is really all you need. So anyways, you're stacking up these 5 stacks of impact 50% faster. You're swinging your hammer around so fast, so fast. You're doing that's basically a plus 50% damage bonus for a while, and it's fantastic. It does a ton of damage. And then we also have this perk here, which is plus 5% toughness damage reduction per missing wound. And that's why we don't worry about coming over to this. This is like just plus 5%. Like, you don't want to waste the points on that, because you could take something else cool somewhere else in the tree. Plus 5% movement speed would be better than this plus 5% toughness damage reduction, in my opinion. Movement speed is an underrated perk, highly underrated. Anyways, you're missing 4 wounds, or the base was 3. We'll stick with 3. You're missing 3 wounds, you get 15% toughness damage reduction, and the closer you are to death, the more your toughness damage reduction gets. So if you get up to that big Giga Chad 5 missing wounds sweet spot, or that's not the sweet spot, it's like the perfect spot, 5 missing wounds. But anyways, you get that plus 25% toughness damage reduction. You're slaying. You're a tank. You're doing plus 25% toughness damage reduction. You're also doing plus 520, so plus 30% base attack speed. So you're flinging out attacks. You take basically no damage to toughness, and you're knocking everything around. And that, my friends, is the in-depth Crusher build guide. Now, I'll go ahead and run into the Psykhanium real quick and show you guys around. The video is already at 30 minutes, so if you guys are still in here, don't forget to... What am I meat grinding? That's what don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. I'd really appreciate it. I'm really pleased with how the Darktide videos have been going. I enjoy making them. They're fun, and yeah, I think the game's a great game. It needs some work. It's a little too grindy for casual players. If you're here watching a build guide, you probably know what I'm talking about. It takes way too long to gain money and materials and perks for weapons. Okay, so we talked earlier about unarmored and flak armored enemies. So we'll start off with... Well, tell me what this guy's called. I don't know. Anyways, you can see from that hit there, he's classified as an unarmored enemy on his body. But you'll see from that overhead heavy that just bonked him on the noggin with the bonk stick, he's actually classified as a flak armored enemy on the head. So you're doing unarmored damage here, but when you come for the overhead, oof, Jesus. This is without any stacks as well, basically. Or with basically the minimum amount of damage stacks you'll pretty much have playing as a Zealot. So he does, so his body is unarmored, his head is armored, or flak. So we're doing plus 20%, whatever we had. We have plus 20% unarmored damage and plus 25% flak armored damage. So these guys are really important to add to be able to really sweep out of the way. Goodness gracious. And then we have this guy. He's classified as unarmored. He's a... I don't remember what he's called. He's the yellow guys. He's the yellow guys. There's these guys, these gunners. Dregs. They're dregs. This is the ad dreg. Then we have the actual dreg gunner. And then we have the scab gunners. And the scab maulers. Okay, so the crushers and the maulers, the scab ones, are what the crusher will deal with the worst. As you can see, we get these stacks up, and he's easy to knock around. I mean, he's not bad at dealing with it. What you'll do when a large horde of these guys comes out, you're probably going to be charging these up and staggering them, and you're going to be taking turns hitting them. So pretend this guy was like a scab mauler. So you'll probably hit this guy with a heavy, and you'll 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 basically be chaining these guys into stagger, and you'll be keeping them at bay while hopefully your teammates are helping out a little bit. And in worst case scenario, you take a step back and you blow these guys away if needed. That's what the pocket bolter is for taking care of these big guys that are kind of annoying. You can see one of the fun things to do with the bolter is to actually take these guys. So if you're in a 1v1 or something, well, first of all, you can just do this to open them up. But that's not as good. As you can see, it's a little harder to chain that up because you'll stagger them with your first overhead heavy. So you can hit him with this charged attack. And the combo for this guy would be heavy, light, heavy. And if we, as you can see, we're doing 2,400 damage, but we're missing no wounds. So if you're missing 3 wounds, you'll absolutely two-shot this guy easily. You just go for those weak spots hits, absolutely toasted. The Crushers, really hard to do any damage to them. As you can see, if we had a few more wounds missing, we would do a little bit better against this guy, but the Crushers are overall pretty difficult to deal with, the Crusher. Ironically, the Crusher's bad at killing the Crushers, but it's not that big of a deal, because we can still mess these guys up plenty fine. Moving on to these other ads, a little sidetracked. His body is classified as flak armor, but his head is classified as unarmored. So you'll notice that it's important to aim when you're and identify the kinds of ads that are attacking you in hordes. These guys will come in groups of 5 or 6 or something, and so you could be hitting his flak armored. Well, his arm is unarmored there, but his shoulder. So okay, interesting. So he's got a little elbow there is unarmored, but his shoulder, whatever. The point is, part of him is flak, part of him is. Yeah, see, that's flak. Part of him is flak, part of him is unarmored. Taking this flak and unarmored damage gives us really consistent damage against these ads. This guy in particular is pretty much all flak. You can hit him in the head. Let's see, this is his body unarmored. So his chest is flak. Let's look for his foot. That was unarmored. I don't know why you'd be hitting him in the foot. This guy is pretty much all flak as well. And what you're noticing is when you're in these 1v1 melee fights, you're probably going to stagger him on the first hit, and then you come in with an overhead heavy, and you're pretty much two-shotting every ad. And if you're spamming the light, it's actually a 3-chain hit. I like to come in. This is the. Let me show you guys this this combo attack that I like to do. So you come in with the heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light. And if you need to get range on some enemies, what I do is dodge. I don't see a lot of people use this mechanic, and that's where you are dodging in on the enemies. So let's say I kill some enemies over here, and the next ones are way over there. So I would have to run or walk over to them or something. Instead of doing that and wasting your time, so you can hit your heavy attack here. You're charging up your next heavy, you're going to dodge over here and actually hit him. So you're using the dodges to actually travel between enemies, because the Zealot has so many dodges and his movement on his dodges is so large that you actually don't need to waste your time running around or attacking. Something that's going to put time in between attacks, which is going to open you up to being hit when you're not staggering enemies. You're going to be dodging in between enemies. So you can see I just took those guys out all the way over here, and I'm already over here on this guy, giving him the sauce. And you'll notice that we've got these impact stacks stacked up. So he's staggered. He takes 30% more damage just on that one hit. If we had 3 missing wounds, he would have absolutely been one-shot. Or two-shot, that is, not one-shot. The Maniacs are a little annoying to deal with as well. So when you get hit with a large horde of Maniacs, what I would do is I highly recommend whipping out the charge attack, going for the overhead heavies. And just like on the Scab Maulers I talked about over here, you're staggering and then you're going between them. We'll pretend this guy's another Scab Mauler or Maniac. So you're hitting this guy, 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 and you're hitting this guy. You're kind of staggering them all. And if you find that they're not getting staggered, maybe you don't have enough impact stacks up yet or something, you just whip out the special attack, charge it out. You hit it, you whip out the special attacks, and you'll keep them all back. The charge special attack should set you up for a nice, see, that's not an overhead heavy. So you gotta think about that a little bit. These combos are kind of weird because you just kind of end up doing them after a while. It's like playing a video game and you're like, hey, what's the, I don't know, what's like the switch weapons button or something? You're like, I don't know. I just always click it. Like, I can't tell you what the button is. I just know what it is. It's just muscle memory. But so you can come in with that. You can hit him with the one light heavy, and you can hit him with the overhead heavy. And this again as well, if we had a couple damage stacks up from hitting enemies from some of our talent tree, or if we had martyrdom stacks up as well. Certainly those together. When you're really playing in the game, hordes are coming, and there's lots of enemies, that's when the Crusher gets going, and you have some missing stacks. So it's kind of hard to show you guys in the Psykhanium because we aren't missing any damage, and the hordes aren't unrelenting as they would be in the level 5. The other enemy that the Crusher struggles with the most in this game would be the Mutant. The Mutant can be quite annoying, and what you're going to do with the Mutant is you really want to hit these overhead heavies on his weak spot, and that's basically the best way to do it. But it's definitely a character that he struggles with. Luckily, the Mutants aren't that hard, and we're fairly mobile and can dodge well with it. So what you'll do is he'll come charging at you, and you'll dodge around him or something. You want to make sure to get the weak spot, because you're hitting him in the arm or something, which is fairly easy to do. You're not getting a lot of damage. So the weak spot hit on the Mutants is really important. I have had times where somehow I'm like one-shotting Mutants. I don't really know how to set that up, and it's not very consistent, so it's not really something you can rely on. So you could run Maniac damage if you really wanted to. I'm not sure if Maniacs are these Mutants. I'm not sure if they're classified as unyielding or what they are, but you can take Maniac damage as well if that's what helps deal with the Mutants. And it'll also help you deal with the Dregs. So in that case, I would nix the unarmored damage, and I would take the Maniac damage instead on the Crusher. My unarmored damage is locked, and I haven't taken the time to get a new Crusher because I think my Crusher is basically great anyways. But 25% damage bonus to the Maniacs would be pretty darn good as well, so you definitely can't go wrong with that. You can see the weak spot hits on this are a little inconsistent. These guys are really fun to kill. You just get this charged up attack, you fly in, you hit him with the overhead heavy. If we had a single stack of Marty Dom on that or any other damage bonus, we would have one-shot him. I'm not even doing this combo right. The best way to do it is to come in with the overhead heavy, light, heavy. So you come in, overhead heavy, light, heavy. And if we had Marty Dom stacks, he would be dead. So the Crushers are hard to deal with. And these guys aren't so bad. Oh, we haven't shown you this guy yet. So you can get a stagger on him, and then when you come in with this overhead heavy, typically he'll be dead. You can come in with the overhead heavy to start with as well. Let's see how that does. Yep. A single stack of Marty Dom, he would be dead. Now we do have some damage bonuses up at the bottom already, so that's kind of skewing our data. But if you're in a large game and you've got 3 missing wounds and you have a few of these damage bonuses up, let's see. So that's how much an unboosted attack does. So you can come in with an overhead heavy. We'll wait for him to respawn. You'll come in with an overhead heavy and then a light, and he's dead. And if you have your damage stacks up and some Marty Dom stacks, he's probably dead on the first overhead heavy. And that's the fun part about this build, is when you're coming in, you're going for weak spot hits. I usually have a ton of weak spots at the end of the game when I come in. Is this? No, okay. I was just seeing if the scoreboard comes up in a second. You can see when you really specialize in killing the ads. And so when hordes of like 50 of these guys are coming at you and you gotta deal with them, it's great. It's great fun. And you'll see like gunners off in the distance, like this guy, he's over here. Say, okay, well, I need to get him into melee, so you're going to F on him and fly in. And there's probably 3 or 4 of these other guys around here. So as soon as you hit this guy, you might not even worry about killing him yet, unless you blasted him like that in one shot. You're going to dodge over to the other guys, pretend that these are all this guy and they're all gunners. You're going to fly in, F on this guy, blast him, but then you need to focus on jumping around and getting the other guys into at least melee combat, so that they're not just blasting you. I don't know if those guys can actually go into melee, but you need to stagger them to make sure their guns aren't on you, because when you get staggered by the guns, it can be really hard to get out. Your F might not even be able to save you on it, depending on... How did this guy get all the way over here? Anyways. Getting gunners into melee combat is really important, and it can be hard to do, especially since they can stun lock you even in your F. So say you're right here and you F at this guy, there's a chance, especially if there's more than one of them, that they're going to stun lock you anyways, and you're going to get stuck like halfway between them, and you're going to get gunned down. And that's what that perk that I was talking about earlier, the gunner resist, or the anti-stagger perk, comes in, that somebody told me about in game. Comes in, it really helps you not die. And this is the... Okay, so final thing is these pox hounds. When they'll run up and they'll be right, say right here, and they're about to jump at you. This is the most fun thing to do if you have good ping, is you just charge up the overhead heavy, and they'll jump at you, and while they're mid-air, you just release this sucker, and his head pops off, and he just flies right by you dead. Absolutely hilarious. One of them... It's funny, it's hard to time, and it's easy to get yourself into trouble doing that, so I wouldn't be doing that when you're off by yourself. I would just dodge it, and I would just give him a little dodge whack, but Giga chatting it and just letting him jump at you, and then you just give him a little noggin bump. Really funny, really fun and funny to do. So, anyways, guys, without further ado, we've made a 45-minute build guide on the Crusher. So, if there are any other questions you have on the Crusher, leave them down in the comments. I think I've pretty much exhausted everything I can on the Crusher at this time. If you have more questions, you know, feel free to let me know. We haven't gone over these guys. These guys are not too hard for the Crusher to deal with because they are classified as flak armor, so this is an important guy to have flak armor against. So while we might not have flak armor against, or damage boost against dregs, we do have damage boost against flak armor, and that's really important for dealing with these guys. So like I said, you could take the Maniac and the flak armor damage instead, and that will give you a little bit different kind of damage coverage, but still really good. Also, the flak armor is super good against shotgunners, so again, another really good enemy to take flak armored against. So yeah, anyways, that's why you're taking flak armor damage. You have to take flak armor damage, unarmored or Maniac, and you're pretty much good to go on the Crusher. So, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next build guide.